So in preparation for mounting this on the new boat, I've got to replace this bracket and this bracket. Can't see it because it's hard to see it with the on here, but down at the bottom there's a place where a bolt is supposed to go through the transom, and they snapped off when the last transom failed. So I already bought replacement brackets, but I got to get these off. And the obvious problem is this is what all the weight is on right now, being held up by the stand. So I've got to support the outboard some other way so that I can have this off this stand. So a while back in my lathe and milling machine, I made a little project. I made this piece right here, which lets me use this lift ring and a stout bolt, and it has the correct dimension and threads on it, so it actually threads into a spot right on top of the flywheel. So oddly enough, you're lifting the entire weight of this motor by the flywheel, which almost sounds like it's a bad idea, but the reality is that in fact Mercury actually sells a Mercury part with a part number that does exactly that. It hooks up to the flywheel and allows you to lift the motor by the flywheel. So they must have intended by design for you to be able to do that. So I'm going to go get the old Oliver and get it up here, and we're going to use a chain on the front end loader, and we're going to lift this up. The way this assembly is put together is these are two separate brackets that are actually held together to each other by this crossbar right here. Also by, there's a tube, hollow tube that runs right through here that they swivel on. I was never able to determine whether or not the tube swivels inside here or if these brackets just swivel on the tube. They do swivel. I always wondered about that because I remember there was a problem where I thought it might be seized up in here, and there's absolutely no grease fittings or any way to get lubricant inside there. So the plan is, if I have to, I'll leave this tube alone and just try and pull these brackets off of the ends of the tubes, because I did have these nuts off before, so I know I can get those off. I'm going to have to start by removing these little dampeners, for lack of a better term. Not quite sure what they're called. And then the other problem I'm foreseeing is I'm not quite sure yet how this cross tube right here, how that's attached to these side ones here. So that could be a big problem, I guess. Alright, well, let's see if I can find the package I got quite a while back when I ordered these parts. Alright, so here's the replacement brackets I got. I bought these offline. Good used ones for 15 bucks a piece. So they look like they're a good match. I guess in later years they omitted these little silly metal bars here, and they made it so you need a wrench to actually turn these. So I could see that these are gonna slip onto that tube, as I suspected. Unfortunately though, it looks like this bar going across here that these attach to is supposed to also be press fit or slip fit through here. And by the looks of mine, I'm gonna venture to guess that they're gonna be seized in there tight. And that might end up making this a nightmare. I might end up having to, quite frankly, I might end up having to just see if I can buy this tube. If I can buy this cross member, I might end up having to cut this one that's in here just to get this off. Because I mean, that just looks horrible, the way that's in there. Well, I'll see what happens. You know, I think before I even go any further, I'm just going to go and make sure this is going to fit on the transom on the new boat. Because I was noticing how thick the transom was on the new boat compared to the old one. It's a bigger boat. It can take up to a 200 horsepower outboard. I'm hoping that this is going to fit, because if this doesn't fit, then the only way I would be able to put this outboard on that boat would be to buy what they call a jack plate, which is that's an investment I didn't plan on wanting to make. I just took a run over to the boat, tried this, and it turns out the thickness here isn't the issue. It actually doesn't seem to fit really squarely on the transom. There's a metal cap piece on the top of that transom. Kind of creates a spacer at the top here. I think it's going to work. It's probably not going to be the ideal situation. I might have to put some shims in here. But clearly the motor that was on that boat before, I don't think it had this type of a mount at all. I think it had a jack plate that was bolted to the transom, and then the motor was attached to the jack plate. But I think those things are pretty expensive. That's why I don't want to buy one. This will start with something easy, taking these decorative caps off. Funny, I break out the big ratchet set, big sockets, and it turns out that this was like hand tight. So let's see if this one was loose too. Not quite as loose. I can understand why this is tight, because these are self-locking, or they're supposed to be self-locking nuts. The fact that I can unscrew this one by hand would tend to indicate to me that the nylon bushing section of this nut that makes it self-locking is worn out. Now I can't just pull this off of here, because it's not going to want to do that, so I have to actually undo this lower one too. Alright. I'm thinking that should be probably greased when it goes back together. I'll just leave it on there for now like that. Alright, so this is what's worrying me, this right here, this post. Well, I guess I'll keep working at what I can do until I get stuck.
We do.
Alright, what's the matter?
Spinning on this side too.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, so then that's a, this is a tube.
Oops.
This is just a tube that has a rod going through it that's threaded on both sides. Okay. So, go ahead, turn it. Alright, so we need a, what size is that? I'll go get a wrench that size. I don't think I have one.
A half.
Half inch? Yeah. Alright, I'll go grab a half-inch one. I don't know why I'm so surprised that that's a rod with a, because I remember now that I think of it, I replaced this. And I remembered it was stuck in here really bad, so I ended up cutting the old one to remove it. And after I cut it, I ended up, I think, realizing that, oh, it's a tube with a rod inside of it, which explains why you're able to replace this without having to spread these apart. There you go. I don't know why you think you gotta do both ends. I just said it's a, this whole thing's gonna slide out and this tube will fall out. Alright, now don't pull it out yet. because you see, you can see the washer. So slide that out.
I won't.
Here, I'll do it.
Oh.
See? That's it. I'll put it back together so it doesn't, parts don't get lost.
Not time for this part.
What the hell are you talking about?
Pull this tube out.
Yeah, that ain't happening.
What about this tube?
Huh?
What about this one? Okay, bye.
This is a rubber grommet that was on the outside of this connection on the shock on the other side, or dampening cylinder, whatever you want to call it. It's completely rotted, dry rotted and junk.
Nice going, Walt.
I'm sure that's going to be a that's probably available as a replacement part. This little cross piece is an adjustment, so this rod can be moved to different holes. So by design, this is a new one that I bought. By design, you just flip up this blade, and that allows this to be slid out, so you can change this adjustment. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is, I think I'm going to go online and I'm going to look at the parts breakdown for this model and see what this looks like. Because right now, the way this is made, I'm not seeing how this is supposed to come off of here. Alright, so I looked at the parts breakdown and was able to figure out that this tube right here is actually one piece from here all the way through to the other side. This is actually, the diameter is reduced down right here for the shock. This right here is pressed into this. So I'd love to be able to just cut this, pull this bracket off of here, and put a new one of these in. But this is still available. I found a couple of new ones on eBay. They want the last suggested retail price for these, I think, which is about $100, $99 and change for that tube. So I'm going to try and save this one. Not sure how yet, but we're going to try and save that one. And, well, there's no way around it, really. Now, one of the things I could try and do is, I could actually, if I had to, I could break this bracket off of this if I have to. In other words, I could do some pretty bad things to this bracket and not really care about it, as long as I'm able to save this. Well, I've tried banging on this a couple of different ways, and this doesn't seem to be moving. This is very hard to twist up and down. This doesn't move freely. Should be pivoting on this, and it's not. Fairly easily. It's not. This is completely seized in here by the looks of it. So it occurred to me that maybe the best way to go about this would be to actually cut some of this with the bandsaw. I've got a portable bandsaw, we'll use that. I think the first cuts I'm going to make is I'm going to cut off these pieces right here, this section. That way I'll be able to easily get in and cut right here. And if I cut this down to right before I get to that tube or that shaft, I might be able to weaken this enough, bang on this, and actually bend this casting apart and get it to break free from around that. We'll see. You kidding me? This must have unplugged. Alright, battery died on the other camera, so to switch to the GoPro. But what ended up happening was, after I made this cut, I tried making this cut with the handsaw all the way down on the inside here. I got as close as I felt comfortable, and then I banged on this and realized that I'm not going to be able to split this like I thought I was going to be able to, because that's pretty thick on the backside there, and it's just not going to want to do it. So then I made another cut right here, and as soon as I made that cut, I found out that this is not seized on this at all. So the fact that I can't move this up and down means that this connection on this side must be seized. But the beauty of this is that if I make that same cut that I made over here on this side, I can take this whole assembly right here out and take it down and not have to deal with it on the motor here as I try and figure out how I'm going to separate these from this. I could even put it on the mill if I wanted to and cut a big slot right there. I'm just going to repeat the process. First, I'm going to cut this out right here, this piece. I'm going to remove this to give me clearance so I can get in here and cut this right off. I need an assistant to keep that motor from spinning. There you go. Got it? Yep. I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if I should just lower it more and sink it into the ground. I don't really want to damage that piece on the bottom, but I managed to get one of these off, so I just got to remember that the rod part is on the bottom, which makes sense because if it was this way, that would allow any water standing on the top of here, rain or whatnot, or splash water, to sit there and get more of a chance to seep in. This way, it only doesn't sit there for very long.
So you can't get this part off?
Huh?
You get this part off?
When I cut this part and this part and this part will all come off together. And then I'll be able to take them down into the workshop and work on getting them apart. A lot easier than messing with it on here.
Yeah, let's go then.
Yeah, we'll see. I'll just stop right there and see if we can't break it off. There we go. See that? See how close I was? Yeah. Actually, it looks like I cut into it maybe. I don't know. Alright, well. So now, that spring, this spring should be able to unhook. Please tell me this spring unhooks, because that'll be something. If the thing that keeps me from taking this off completely is just this one stupid spring. What the heck is holding that? There's a pin right here that goes through that the spring hooks onto. Grab me that big screwdriver right there. See, this end of the spring is made to slide over this rod before you put these pieces on. But the other end of the spring, I'm hoping it doesn't have a looped end.
What's that spring for?
That spring brings this back down in case if you hit something underwater, this hits something. This is designed so that this can swing up, okay, instead of damaging and ripping that off. This can bang up out of the way and go over it, like if you hit a submerged rock. And then this spring is what makes it come right back, and this spring is what holds it down. Boy, that rod's really eroded away. I wonder if that's solid metal in the middle there. Yeah, and this pin that's driven in there to hold this spring in. It goes into what appears to be a blind hole in the center. It doesn't go all the way through, so I couldn't bang that pin out this other side anyway. It doesn't come out that side. It actually goes into the tube that acts as the exhaust and the drive shaft housing. And this right here is supposed to be able to swivel, and it doesn't. So that's another problem, and we got to get this off. This side was moving this freely. This side is seized on. Go figure.
Or you bang it.
You know?
Like banana.
You can try and bang it. Don't want to bend this. See, it's stuck on the shaft, but if we can get it to start moving, it might break free,
Yeah, but something
and then we might be able to get it off. Right now, it doesn't want to move at all. I know what I need. Pipe wrench. Pause my camera, please. It's ridiculous. There we go. Wow. That should not be seized up like that. I'm lucky if I'm getting that thing to move 15 or 20 degrees of rotation. That ain't happening. All right, looking at this, it occurs to me that if I could rotate this spring all the way down, the open end of the spring would be facing up, and I've got a much better chance of being able to get this spring unhooked. And to do that, all I have to do is remove this piece, which normally would be a bear to get this pin out, but this is all new. I replaced this last year, or 2 years ago, 2 summers ago when I had this thing running on the water. So this is a stainless steel cotter pin, so it wasn't all rusted and toast like the one that I had to deal with. Matter of fact, I think I had to cut this out on the old one. This is a new old stock piece that I got off the internet. This pin, I'm hoping that I wisely coated this with a liberal coating of anti-seize, or at the very least grease. I believe there might be something on there because it did just come popping out fairly easily. I gotta get this lined up. Can't see what I'm hitting here. There we go. That's coming out pretty easily. It's probably a stainless pin. There we go. Now there is a small spring on this end. That gets it most of the way out of the way. But I can completely remove it if I remove this cotter pin and this little winch pin, disconnecting it from this rod that goes down into the shifter. Oh, that's not even a pin, is it? There we go. Looks like a pin I may have fashioned out of a bolt. And it looks like I did not have a stainless steel cotter pin, the correct size for that, because that cotter pin is not rust free. See, I could have made my life a lot easier. This doesn't just pull up, does it? Oh yeah, it does. Okay. Yeah, I could just, all right, there we go. Now, with that out, I can see I got a better chance of getting this thing to come off. Come on. Ta-da. Well, rather than bring this down to the shop and start working on this, I think I'll use what daylight I have to work on this problem here. So the other thing I could do at this point, it occurs to me, is I could take this whole bracket assembly off and bring this down to the basement shop and maybe use the shop press to get this off. I don't know. This is spinning freely, which makes me think that if I just simply take this band off, this metal one right here, these two nuts, this whole mount comes off. You can't get to the top ones because they're, where the heck are they? They must be behind this bracket, which makes me think that maybe this top, there's a part that goes up inside there so that when you undo the bottom, this drops down and out. Does that seem plausible? Yeah.